All right, hello everybody. Today we're going to kind of go through some of the cell phone data that you guys turned in through the Google form, and we're going to start looking at the number of minutes spent on average per day on your phone. An important thing to have in mind whenever you're doing any statistical analysis is, what is the question that we're trying to answer? Is there a question that we want to know the answer to? I didn't give you that question ahead of time, I don't think, or maybe I did. But either way, even if you have this data, I think the easy question that you might come up with is maybe who spends more time on their phone on average, males or females? So let's just kind of go at it from that perspective. If you have a different question in mind you want to answer, maybe there's a way to tackle that too. And if you can figure that out, great. If you have something else you're interested in but can't figure it out, please let me know. I'd be happy to help you. But we're going to kind of go at this as if we're interested in who spends more time on their phone. Before we get started, there is one data point. Well, we should look at the data first and make sure that it's in the format we want. So I've kind of cleaned it up some. You'll see here are all the values, and then here is where it says male or female. So what we should probably do is make sure that the data all makes sense, that there isn't anything in here that can't be correct. So I'd be looking for things like 24 hours times 60 minutes is 1440 minutes in a day. So if you see anything bigger than that, that doesn't make any sense, right? Even if you're on your phone 24/7, it can't be higher than that. So I'm going to be looking for numbers that are bigger than that, just as a mistake or anything else that's bizarre. As we scroll, you may have already seen it. This one right here doesn't make any sense. I'm guessing this person is not on their phone 8.14 minutes a day. So we'll come back to that. But let's scroll. Here's a big one, 1,000 minutes, but it's still under the 1440. So we're okay there. I'm scrolling. I'm looking for anything else weird. Here's 1050. Um, they're both female. They're both 1050. I'm going to think this one's a duplicate. So we'll come to that in a second also. So first thing, let's fix this one up here, this 8.14. I'm guessing that what they meant was 8 hours and 14 minutes. So let's do, so in Excel, you can do calculations, right? So if you start a cell with an equal sign, you're turning it into a calculator or you're writing a formula. So if I do that and I take 8 for the hours times 60 for 60 minutes in an hour, and then we add these 14 minutes, so I'll just add 14. The order of operations will make Excel do the multiplication first and then add the 14. So you just hit enter on that. 494 minutes. That makes more sense. Let's put 494 in there instead. We don't need those anymore. I can delete them. So we have that duplicate, but another way to see duplicates, and something we should probably do anyway, is I want you to highlight both of these. Now there's several ways to highlight. You can click in one and drag, but then you got to drag down to the bottom. If you want the entire column, you can click on the letter itself. You see this little arrow pop up. Click on that and drag it over. Now we've selected the entire column all the way down to the bottom of the rows. And if you aren't aware, there are a lot of rows. So this is the very bottom. There are 1,048,576 rows. So we've selected all the way down to that if we drag on the letter A and B. Then we're going to click on this data tab. Mine's already open. Yours was probably at home. So go to data and then sort, which is this box right here. It shows the A's and the Z's in it. And it's going to ask us which column we want to sort by. Well, first, let's sort by column A. Let's get these values from smallest to largest, just because. Might as well. But we're going to add a level. So after we sort by smallest to largest, I also want to sort alphabetically in column B, which is going to sort males and females. So if we do both of these, it'll put it in alphabetical order, and then it will rearrange so that the lists should be numerical order by gender. And I did that backwards. So let's do it the other way. Let's sort by column B first and then column A. Now we get smallest to largest, females first, then male, because F comes before M in the alphabet. Okay, so now we can kind of look for some duplicates that might be a little silly. And sometimes there's just going to be two, and that's fine. So I actually think I'm going to leave this, just because I don't know for sure that was a duplicate entrance. We've got a couple duplicates down here too, but let's just leave all of that. Let's assume this data is accurate. The next thing we probably want to do is have some headings so we know what this is. So if you left click on row 1 over here, on the heading for row 1 itself, or right click, excuse me, if you right click, you get these options. I want to insert, and that's going to insert a row at the top. I'm going to call this average. I'm going to call the next one gender. I'm going to make both of those a couple fonts bigger and bold. And then another cool trick in Excel, if you highlight the whole column, and then if you hold your mouse in between the two, you get this little symbol, a line with 2 arrows on it. That's how you change the width of a column. If I double click on that, it's going to make them both fit perfectly. It'll make the columns as big as they need to be so that everything fits. So let's do that. Okay, what's maybe the first thing we would need if we're going to start doing some analysis of this? You're probably going to think average, like what's the average? So let's do that. Let's do, just click over here somewhere out of the way. Give yourself at least 3 or 4 columns in between because we're going to do some more stuff over there. Let's call this whole group average. Again, after you type it, if you double click on the edge of your cell, I typed mine in H, yours doesn't have to be an H, it'll make it fit, okay? And then we just need to think, how do I calculate the average? So I'm going to start with an equals sign, right? And then one interesting, cool aspect of Excel is that it has a lot of these formulas built in. Rather than having to add up all those numbers by hand and divide by the number of values that we have, we can actually just say find the average. And if you type average, you'll see it brings up this little menu here. And this menu is offering different formulas that are built into Excel. This little description explains what's going to happen. So this is the first one, returns the average or arithmetic mean of its arguments. Arguments are the data points we're using, which can be numbers or names, arrays, or references. We don't care about any of that because we have numbers. So I want average. We're going to have to start a parenthesis. And here's where I'm going to highlight. Now that I've typed that parenthesis, it's going to ask for what's the first number, what's the second number. You can type them in, or you can click on this and just drag down to include all of the values that you want. So now you'll see it says average of A2 to A91. Well, the first cell is A2, and the last cell is A91. So it's going to find the average between all of the numbers, find the average of all those numbers between cells A2 and A91. Close the parentheses and hit enter. So there's our average, 400.9889 minutes. Now that's for the whole group, right? We probably want the group for the average of the males. So let's do males average. We're going to do the exact same thing, equals average, open parenthesis, and then I'm going to scroll down until I see where the males start, right here at 60, and I'm going to include all of the males data points. I'm going to close the parentheses. You can do that from down here. You can scroll back up. Now you see us finding the average A51 to A91. So now it's just doing the back portion of the data, the male data. And we're going to hit enter. The male's average is 394.8, not too far off from the whole group. Leave yourself a couple of rows in between these. We're going to do it again. Now I want the female's average. And we're going to do it a final time. Average, open parenthesis, but now I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to stop when I get to male, making sure I include all of the females. Now you'll see we're finding the average from A2 to A50, which makes sense because for the males we started at A51. Close the parentheses, hit enter. There's the females. So right off the bat, those look like they're pretty similar, and it might be hard to determine who has spent more time on their phone than another, but that doesn't mean we need to give up yet. I'm going to make these bold just to make them little headings. The other thing we can do with these numbers, because we don't really care about the 10,000ths place, up here under number, so I'm on the home tab, under the number heading, you'll see these two little buttons. These will increase or decrease the number of decimal points that we carry. So if you hover, one says increase decimal, shows more decimal places, the other one will show fewer. So if we highlight these three and I show fewer, let's just go to 2 decimal places. That should be plenty. Okay. We have the average. We talked about measures of center. Another common measure of center is the median, right? So let's say we wanted the median of these. So let's type median over here. I'm going to put, well, yeah, let's do that. We'll put median over here. Equals. Now, median's a super common, basic calculation. If we start typing median, oh, look at that. Excel has median built in. Returns the median or the number in the middle of a set of given numbers. Perfect. And I'm going to take the entire group because I'm under whole group average. So I'm just going to do the median of the entire group. I'm scrolling. It's going slow. Here we go. Close it. We're going from 2 to 91 again. The median is 349 minutes. Let's make this bold also. I'm just doing a little bit of formatting as we go. You can copy my formatting. You can do something else. Whatever works for you is fine. We're going to do it again for the males and the females. So again, equals median. Whenever you're trying to find something in Excel, try this first. It may or may not be a built-in formula, but you'd be surprised at how many formulas are built in here. So median, parentheses, we're doing the males. So I'm going to scroll down to where the males start. And I'm going to highlight all of their data. Make sure not to get extra. Close the parentheses. Hit enter. Their median's 344. Very close. Same thing for the females. Median. Open parentheses. Notice I'm going to not let go for a second. Whoops, too many. When I highlight all my rows, it's telling me right next to my mouse how many rows and columns I have selected. So right now I have 49 rows times one column. If I go deeper, it's 50 rows, 52 rows, 58 rows. If I go to the right, I have 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns. So that's a way for you to kind of quickly count how much data you're encompassing. So I have 49 females. I've got them. I'm going to close parentheses and hit enter. And there's my median for the females. So we've got the average and the median. Another thing that goes along with average a lot, obviously, would be standard deviation. So if we want to calculate the standard deviation, right, the median or the average tells us where the middle is, or it's one way to find the middle. The standard deviation will tell us how spread out that data is, right? The larger the standard deviation, the less consistent our data is. If the standard deviation is really small, that would indicate that most of the data points are right around this 400.99. If standard deviation is really large, it could mean that there's numbers from 3 all the way up to 10,000, and 400 just happens to be the middle. So standard deviation is kind of important. And if you're looking at like home values, like in the Helena area, for example, if you wanted to know the average home value in Helena, it's probably really, really high. The reason for that, there are a couple of homes in the Helena area. There's one specifically that I know of that's near Canyon Ferry Lake that has a value of just shy of $30 million. Well, when you have a house that's worth $30 million, that's going to drag the average of the home prices way up. So think about what the bulk of the home prices in the Helena area are going to be. They're going to range from, $100,000 probably to $400,000 is where the vast majority of homes in Helena are going to be. 100 to 400,000 is a tiny number compared to 30 million. So that value is going to drag the home prices way, way up. So standard deviation is one thing we can use to try and help adjust for that, or at least be aware of it. So I'm going to type under whole group average, whole group standard, I'll abbreviate deviation. Okay. Now, hopefully you remember that the standard deviation is the average of the squares of the differences of the data. So let's back up a little bit. We need some differences. So in our headings over here, let's put differences. I don't think I spelled it right, but Excel fixed it for me. So these are size 14. Let's make this 14. Just to make it all look good, I'm going to make the size fit. So the differences means I need to take, so we're doing equal sign. I want to find the difference between each of my data points and the average. So I'm going to go equals. I'm going to click over to my first data point, and I'm going to go minus, and I'm going to click over on what the average is, the 400.99. Now this part gets important, and I'll show you why in a second. So hit enter. So it's going to calculate that the difference between 150 and the average is 250.99. So this first data point is 251 below the average. If I click and drag that down, this extends formulas to the next thing. It'll copy the formula and keep applying it. And I get 180. So notice if I click on it, it'll show me the formula. It's taking A3 minus I6. Oh, there's nothing at I6. So as I drag this formula down, it's moving down the cells it's referencing. Also, it's moving down this list, which is what I want, but it's also going to move down this list, which is not what I want, because I want to subtract each of these values from this one. So what I need to do, I'm going to hit escape. You can always hit escape when you're in a formula to get out of it. I'm going to go back to this one, and after clicking on the I5, so let's just type this again real quick, equals. I'm going to click A2, my first data point, minus the average over here. But after I do that, I'm going to hit F4. It's the function key at the very top of your keyboard, F4. And what that's going to do is put in these dollar signs. You can also just type the dollar signs, one before the I, one before the 5, or whatever that cell is that your average is in. And what that does is it makes it what's called a hard reference. It's going to always go to this one no matter what. The blue one, A2, will still go down the list as I move my formula down. But over here, it's always going to choose this specific cell no matter how far I drag it, which is what I want because that whole group average isn't moving. So I'm going to hit enter again. Notice that one did not change. But now when I drag this down, that 180 is going to change. Now it's negative 220.99 because 180 is 220 below 400.99. If I drag it one more time, I should see the exact same number because the next data point is also 180, and it works. So rather than dragging that all the way to the bottom, if you click on the last one, you see this little tiny box in the corner, not this big one with the arrow, but the little tiny square, double click on that, and it'll shoot the formula all the way down to the bottom of your list, which is good. Now, differences are great. They tell us kind of, where compared to the average our data points are. However, some are negative, some are positive, which isn't good. So then we square them. So let's call this the squares. So I'm going to start a new formula in my new column titled squares. I'm going to hit equals. I'm going to go to differences, and I'm going to square it. So above the 6, you'll see a little caret. So I'm going to go Shift 6 to give me the caret. It means to the, right? And then I'm going to square it. So it's going to take cell C2 and square. I'm going to hit enter. That number's huge, right? Way bigger than I want. I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to shrink my decimal size. I don't want that many decimals. Let's just go to 2 decimal places. We'll keep everything at 2 decimal places. Okay, then I'm going to click it to shrink it. So now if I click and drag this, it's going to copy that formula. It's going to square this number, make it this, and keep it to 2 decimal places. So I can either drag it all the way down to the bottom, or you can just double click on this little square here, and it'll shoot it to the end of your data, which is a handy little trick that Excel has built in. So now we're getting somewhere. Now I have the differences and the squares, which is good because the standard deviation is the average of the squares. So I'm going to go equals average, but I don't want the average of the data itself. I want the average of the squares of the differences of the data. So I'm going to click and I'm going to highlight my squares column, and I'm going to close it and hit enter. Right? Now, I forgot to say something. It's not just the average of them because we squared them, right? So this number is way too big. We need the square root of the average. So if you realize in a formula you make in Excel that you've made a mistake, which I just did, you can click on it. You'll see the number in the cell, but if you look up here at this formula bar, which is what this is called, you'll see the formula. This is the average of cells D2 to D91, which is great, but I want more than that. I want the square root. And if you start typing in front of the equal sign, you'll see new formulas show up. So there it is. Square root returns the square root of a number. So I want that. When you have it highlighted, you can hit tab or you can keep typing. If you hit tab, it'll also include this first parenthesis. So now what I'm taking is the square root of the average of the squares. I just need to add a close parentheses. Excel will show you when you close parentheses, which is kind of cool. So watch exactly as I type this parenthesis. You'll see the one after the square root get bolded just for a second. That's to show that I've closed that one. So I have 2 open parentheses and 2 closed parentheses. Now we're set. Now I can hit enter. If you forget that last parenthesis, let's say I tried to hit enter without it, Excel will remind you, oh wait, there's a typo, and it says, I found a typo in your formula and tried to correct it to this. Do you want to keep the correction? Almost always when this happens, it's just something silly like that, so I'll hit yes. There's my standard deviation. Now that is huge, right? So that means that this data is not that centered around 400. Let's do it again for the males and the females. So let's go males, standard deviation, and then I'm also going to have females, standard deviation. Now, standard deviation, that wasn't so hard. We were able to type that formula pretty quickly, but Excel also has a formula for standard deviation. So if I start typing standard STD, and you'll see that there's some stuff here that looks like standard deviation. There's standard deviation P, calculate standard deviation based on the entire population, or standard deviation S, estimate standard deviation based on a sample. We want the population because we're treating this set of data as if it's our population. So that's what we want. So I'm going to highlight this one and I'm going to hit tab. That finishes typing it for me. Now it asks for the values. So now I'm just going to go straight to the data itself, not to the squares. But you'll see I have accidentally done the whole list, and this is supposed to be just males. So I can adjust it over here by clicking and dragging to be just the males. That's all I want. I don't want females included. I'm going to hit close the parentheses and hit enter. 209. So obviously that's a huge standard deviation, but that seems to fit because it's similar to our last one. So what I'm learning from doing this is that these standard deviations are so big that this data is very spread out. Let's do it one last time for females. So equals standard dot deviation dot p. You'll see it's not showing me anymore, which is why I usually, oops, because it's not standard dot. I usually just click on the one I want. I want standard deviation dot p for the whole population. I'm going to hit tab. That'll finish typing it out for me, and then I'm going to choose just the female data, which ends, and you kind of got to be finicky with this, ends at row 50 or 49 rows of it. Close the parentheses and hit enter. Now I have my standard deviation. I'm going to shrink my decimal. I don't know how that happens. So now they all fit. So based on this information, we might be able to say, okay, well, the whole group average, let's group these here. I'm just going to put these in boxes so they're easier for us to see while we talk about it. You can do this, but you don't have to. Okay, let's zoom in on this a little bit. So the whole group has an average of 400.99. I'm going to shrink these just so while we talk about them. Okay, whole group average of 401. Notice it rounded up. The whole group standard deviation is at 204, which is huge. That means the vast majority of the data is between 200 and 600, subtracting and adding the standard deviation. The male average is at 395 and goes up, has a standard deviation of 210. Female average starts at 406 and has a standard deviation of 200. So the male average is slightly smaller, but their standard deviation is slightly larger. Female average slightly larger, standard deviation slightly smaller. Really hard to say who uses their phones more. There's other statistical analyses we could do that would help with that. But at this point, it's just not something we've had time to talk about this year. So a lot of what happens in statistics, frustratingly, is that maybe you can't make a determination. Some people would be tempted to say, oh, males have a smaller average, they spend less time on their phone. That may not be true. That really may not be true. Now, for this set, you could, for the people who responded to this survey, you could maybe say, on average, the boys spend less time on their phone than the girls. And you would be probably correct. Well, you would be correct if you say on average. However, you're talking a difference of 11 minutes. It's not exactly earth-shattering stuff here. So that would be a tough argument to make to anybody. There are other things we could do. We could make some tables. We could make histograms. We could make box and whisker plots. And if we had more time, and especially together, that's something we would do. I'm assuming that this is some of your first times programming in Excel at all, and I just kind of wanted to give you a little example of how real statistical analysis is done, how programming in Excel looks, and I think this is plenty for one day's worth of stuff. We're coming up on 25 minutes on this video, and I don't want to tie you up all day. So For your homework, all I want you to do is to send me the copy of the Excel sheet you were editing. So if you weren't editing your own sheet during this, I'd like you to go back and do it. You can follow the video along, but edit this worksheet, and I want to see something that looks like this. You don't have to copy my formatting exactly. I would like you to show at least a couple decimal places, so it should look something more like that. Um, and I want to be, when you send it to me, I'm going to want to be able to click on it and see that there's a formula here. I don't want you to just type in these numbers because I recognize that our data is going to be the same. But do your best. If you get stuck, please let me know. I'm happy to jump on and we can share screens. You can share yours with me and I can see what you're looking at, or vice versa, to help you do this. But Excel's an incredibly powerful tool. I use it every day at work and a lot of times at home to keep track of various things. My entire schedule for the school year is actually an Excel program that I've written over the last 5 or 6 years. I keep adding things to it. And it's an incredibly powerful program that can do a lot of things. So it's worth playing around with and being a little bit more comfortable with. So this is kind of just an intro to that. So your copy of your Excel sheet is due on Teams. Um, Tomorrow at midnight. I'm happy to extend that if you're struggling, but you need to let me know that ahead of time. If you need help with it, I'm happy to help you with it. Again, just let me know ahead of time or that you'd like to meet, and we can jump on and sort out whatever problems you're having. That'll be it for today. This is going to be basically the last lesson for the year. So this is your last homework assignment. Tomorrow, if you probably already saw on the website, we are going to start the semester test, and that will be the last new assignment for the year. So head on over to the website. You can read about that. If you're freaking out, please don't stress about it. It's not meant to be a stressful thing. Um, if you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email. Good luck with this. Let me know if you need help, and have a great day.